Hey guys, Zon Fox here, and today we're going to be doing the Week 8 Power Rankings of the USFL season. So this week has, I believe, the least amount of movement in my Power Rankings. I only have two teams actually changing spots, and this is honestly going to be probably the shortest one so far, since a lot of these points are getting kind of repetitive, and there's not really that much to say. So without further ado, let's get started. Coming in at number 8 is the Maulers. I think this is almost the most obvious one in the entire list. I mean, it's pretty simple. This team is just bad. I mean, their point differential and their points scored are both just so far down from everybody else. It's genuinely insane. Their one win was by like 1 point, and aside from that, they've pretty much gotten blown out in every game. There's like really nothing to say about this team that I haven't said before. They have no real good, like defense or offense or like anything really. It's just, I mean, their coaching is questionable. It's pretty bad, honestly. I really don't think there's that much to say. This team is basically what they've been the entire year, and that's almost always viewed as just the worst team in the league. Dropping one spot are the Houston Gamblers. I think this is pretty obvious why this team drops. They now have like the third worst point differential in the league, even though their offense has scored some decent points. But overall, it's just the same recurring things. Yes, they still have Donald Payne and Chris Odom, who still lead the league in tackles and sacks. Yes, Clayton Thorson leads the league in passing touchdowns. Those are all cool and all, but at the end of the day, this team still is blowing halftime leads. And especially now at this game, they actually got beat. They legit got beat after the halftime. I mean, it's just, I really don't know what to say about this team anymore. Every single week, the same thing happens. But now that they got blown out, I feel like I had to move them down. Whereas the team above them showed that they still have some fight left in them. The Gamblers pretty much ended up just laying down and just accepting that they weren't going to make the playoffs. Pretty sad. Coming in at number 6 are the Michigan Panthers. I don't think this one should be that much of a shock that they're moving up. To put it simply, Reggie Corbin is now leading the league in rushing yards. They're still second in third down percentage. And even though they no longer are that insane threat on defense and points allowed, they did take the New Orleans Breakers to overtime. And the Breakers have, for the past pretty much almost since maybe week 2, they've been top 4 in every single power ranking I've done and pretty much everyone else's. And they took them to OT and barely ended up losing. And I feel like, especially considering the fact that Josh Love, their new quarterback, didn't even play literally that good. He went 18 for 37 with 179 yards. He wasn't even that good. But despite that, this team was able to keep it close and nearly pulled off a win. If they had won in overtime, they'd be 2-5 and they would still have a shot. I mean, they still technically can make the playoffs, but let's be real, they probably won't. But I feel like it's only fair to put them up higher, especially when compared to the Gamblers. I mean, in points scored, yeah, they're 25 behind, but they still have a plus 8 point differential comparatively, which isn't the most insane difference, but overall, I mean, I just feel like the Gamblers should move down since they're eliminated, whereas the Panthers have, shown that they still are trying to win, whereas the Gamblers kind of just are trying to just not care anymore. Coming in at number 5 are the Tampa Bay Bandits. Now, for the Bandits, man, this last week really hurt. The Generals stopping them in that last drive was a very, very big deal. I've talked about it before, but to put it simply, this has made it so they're virtually in a really bad position for the playoffs. They needed this win, and they did not get it. I mean, it's just, to put it simply, they're here because they're not in the playoff race right now. They're third in their division, and with the Breakers being ahead of them and so are the Stallions, it's just, I really don't think this team's going to make it. And especially when you just see them play and you watch their games, this is another time where they could have won on the end and they didn't. Talamu threw 3 interceptions. He had another one of those games where it's man, really? So, I mean, they're definitely better than the teams below them, which kind of helps when those teams have the same amount of wins as this one team when they are combined. But it's pretty safe to say that of all the not 1-6 teams, the Bandits are the worst. Coming in at number 4 are the Philadelphia Stars. I think this is pretty easy to say. I mean, this team, it's just, honestly, it's kind of obvious. They're second in points scored, believe it or not. They're fourth in point differential, -1, which I think is really funny. They're still negative in point differential despite having a winning record. But suffice to say, they have the second most points scored in the USFL so far. They actually beat the Gamblers. This is like the first time in the whole season where a team ended up beating the Gamblers by more than like a point or two or a touchdown. And as for the team, they're still winning with Case Cookis playing. Channing's dribbling is, pretty solid, having his 5 interceptions so far in the season. He's a main, reason why this team is doing so good. But overall, it's just, there's not that much to say aside from the fact that they're, getting the job done like they have to. They're winning games, and they're basically one win and they make it to the playoffs. So if they can just win one last game, that's all they got to do. So pretty simple for that. They're second in their division. Their division is with 2 teams that are 1-6, and they just have to win one more game, and they play both those teams still. So, pretty easy for them to make the playoffs. Coming in at number 3, the New Orleans Breakers. I'm still not the biggest Breaker fan, but they're leading the league in passing yards per game, leading the league in third down percentage. They have the passing yards leader, and they're the points leader. And I still don't believe in this team. I genuinely look at this team and think it basically comes down to me looking at them against the Stallions, thinking, can this team really beat the Stallions on neutral ground? And man, even without the Stallions' home field advantage, I really don't think this team could beat them. And I'm only putting them above the Stars because the fact that this team has been more consistent, I guess. They're 5-2. They have, they're leading a bit more stats, but it's just, they're third in points scored. I know they're second in point differential, which is, great and all. But, man, it's just, I still don't believe in this team. So, I guess we'll see. They still haven't even made the playoffs yet, but they have to play the Breakers next week. Well, the Stallions, so I guess we'll see. Coming in at number 2 are the Generals. There's not really much for me to say about this team. There really isn't. This team is just... they're just great. What do I really... what can I say at this point that makes you go, wow, I'm shocked about the Generals being good? Really, what is there for me to say? They won yet again with just Luis Perez being their quarterback. They're, high in, point differential. There's no point for me to show it. It's the same thing. This team runs, plays defense, and wins. Number 1 is the Stallions. Here's the point differential, 12 points scored. They're up in point differential by, 24. They're up in points scored by, 12. And then here's the standings in the league. They're undefeated. It's just, this is the most repetitive. They're the best team in the league because they still won't lose. They just refuse to lose. Because you know what? They might not be winning every game by 20, but they're still winning. And they're still undefeated. No matter what they do, they are winning. They are number 1 until they lose. This has been Zomfox. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe and hit the bell so you can notify as soon as I upload. Overall, it was just a pretty easy week. There wasn't any upset. Basically, all 4 teams that you expected to win these games won these games. And not a single one was to a point where it was oh yeah, man, this team is so much better or worse than the other, except for just the Gamblers and Panthers. So it just is how it is. I'll see you guys next time. Have a great night.